You mentioned first and foremost Marxism. Well, that of course was started by Karl Marx in the mid-1800s. Karl Marx was not the first ever communist, actually. He was hired by a group of communists in Switzerland to articulate the Communist Manifesto. Karl Marx lived in London. His best friend was Friedrich Engels, who actually was a pretty rich guy, who financed his writings. The biblical equivalent would be Theophilus, right? So Theophilus was kind of the supporter of Luke to write the book of Luke and Acts. That's kind of probably not the best, like it's not it's a fitting example. He was the sponsor, right? So Karl Marx wrote two big pieces of literature that he's known for. Of course, the Communist Manifesto, but more importantly, Das Kapital is the one that really he started to articulate his philosophy. Now, Karl Marx did not just come onto the scene and start to invent a lot of stuff. He was just a better articulator of these ideas, more so than anyone that came before him. The idea that there shouldn't be private property, the idea that people should be communal in nature, he didn't all of a sudden just get in the laboratory and discover it. It was kind of being experimented with many thousands of years before. So prior to Karl Marx being hired to write this piece of literature, he was heavily inspired by a French philosopher by the name of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Jean-Jacques Rousseau probably has had more of an impact on kind of the current political climate that we're living in right now. Rousseau rejected the biblical view of human nature. He believed that in the state of nature, human beings are wonderful to each other. He valued the infant over the adult, the primitive over the civilized, and his argument was that the reason there's bad in the world is not because people are bad, but the systems were improperly built around people. And if we build better systems, then we can live in a state of heaven or a state of harmony. So Karl Marx wrote this piece of literature, and it was actually condemned. It was mocked when it was first published. Marx never lived actually to see his ideas materialize. And then something very interesting happened. The transition happened from the farms to the factories almost overnight. The Industrial Revolution began. And Marx started to see the beginning stages of this. And Marx made some correct arguments and observations and then some very incorrect policy suggestions. He made the correct observation that in a market, you're going to see some form of inequality. And that is absolutely correct. The idea is, how do you manage that inequality? His argument was, let's obliterate the entire system, because eventually he believed that the destruction of the capitalist superstructure was going to be one of demise. And so the ideas really didn't catch fire, and there was a couple small movements up until the Russian Revolution. And so Russia was under Tsarist rule for hundreds of years, and there was a lot of anxiety growing because as all of Europe was industrializing, the agricultural part of kind of the Russian landscape felt to be, they were very disenfranchised, and it's actually a way to break apart World War I. Vladimir Lenin was sent out of a German prison, equipped with the Communist Manifesto, and started a Russian Revolution that we know as the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. This was the first real experiment of communism. And it was a bloodbath, right? I mean, it was awful. It was the Bolsheviks versus the Mensheviks. Eventually, Vladimir Lenin takes power, messy transition, and eventually, Joseph Stalin takes power.